Okay, so we're going to have a panel now, but I'm going to get each of these people to come up and speak, and we'll get you to speak at the microphone so we can hear you really well. And then we'll get you to join behind me, and then we'll have some discussion. So first of all, we've got Melinda Polimeni.
Yeah, good job.
From the Director for the Centre for Evidence and Implementation, and she's going to talk about common elements of building blocks for evidence-informed practice. So can we give Melinda a warm welcome, please?
Thanks, Deb. So I thought, following on from Megan's presentation, hearing how it has worked in practice, I might just step us back to really talking about what are common elements. So for some of you in the room who have heard a little bit about it, kind of find it a bit mysterious. So what are they? How do they fit with other forms of evidence in practice? So I might start off with that and then talk about a few examples of the work that we're doing around common elements, both in Victoria and elsewhere. But I guess the beauty of common elements and the way that they get their name really is they are the practice elements or technical bits to evidence-informed practice. So I think there is a misconception that common elements are like against manualised programs and like you have to pick one or the other. But common elements are really those discrete techniques that you will see in evidence-informed practices. But they are the discrete units. So those practices can be bundled up into modules, evidence-informed modules. They can be bundled up into practice frameworks, and they can be bundled up and put together in a way that informs, or is used in a manualised program. So if you pick up any of those things that draw on the same evidence base, you are going to see the same practices. So all of the manualised programs will have very similar practices if they are targeting the same population in the same context. So the elements are really what are the discrete practices that are the building blocks of evidence-informed practice. So just to give you a few examples, and I'll draw on I guess some child examples because we're here to talk about families and children. So things like praise. We know praise works with children. If you praise a child for something they do, they are more likely to do it again. That is a practice element. It works on its own. But if you bundle it up with some other practice elements like giving clear and effective instructions, so if you use instructions and praise together, then you're going to. So if you put enough elements together, you get a module or a package or a framework. So I just wanted to clarify that. I guess if you are able to use a manualised program in your work, if it fits with the context that you work in, if it fits with the skills of the practitioners and the training that they have, then you should totally use it. I guess the advantage that common elements have is that they can make evidence much more transportable across contexts, more flexible because you can put them together in different ways, and so they're much more adaptable to different contexts, different ways of working. And I guess that's what I love about them. You're not locked down into a specified set or sequence even of practices. And so there are some challenges with using manualised programs, which the common elements can kind of come and address. I guess if you're not in a space where you're able to work in a particular way or you don't have the particular resources to do a manualised program, then you can draw on some elements and design them, fit them to your context, your clients. So I'm going to talk about, we've heard a bit about the work in Victoria through Megan, and I'm sure some other people will pick up on that. So we have been working to support the implementation of the trial in Victoria. And I guess we are also leading some other pieces of work around the country. So I'll talk a little bit about that because the South Australians heard about what was happening in Victoria and so are on their own journey to trial common elements. And I guess the really exciting thing about what's happening in South Australia is that they are leading with the Aboriginal community controlled agencies. They will lead the selection of elements. They'll decide which elements will work best in that context. So that's a very conscious decision that if we can get it right for Aboriginal families, we will get it right for everybody. And so that means that the elements that will be selected will be, culturally appropriate, relevant, acceptable to the practitioners that are using them. So, something we know very strongly from implementation science is that if practices are not acceptable, not feasible in a setting, they will not be used. It doesn't matter how well researched or evidence-based they are, if they're not usable in the context that they are needed, they won't be used. So I think in that space, common elements will be great for being able to tailor and target a set of evidence-informed practices that will really meet the needs of the communities there. So that's very exciting. And I should acknowledge that we worked pretty closely with VACA on developing the elements for the Victorian trial, and also we had Madass as another one of the trial sites, so Mildura District Aboriginal Service. So we have got, a leg up on some of the work that we'll be doing in South Australia because of the work that we've done in Victoria, so that's great. The other really exciting thing that we're working on at the moment, thinking about being able to transport evidence-informed practice across context, is some work that we're doing in collaboration with Monash University Department of Social Work. So they have the biggest social work course. They produce more graduates than any other university. So we are collaborating with Monash to really embed common elements into the curriculum of the master's program. So we are able to help them select what are the practice elements that really cut across social work practice. It will be very strongly based on being able to, demonstrate those skills and understand how to use them. And that's really exciting, because what that means is those graduates will come out with not only a really good grasp of evidence-informed practices, but if they get a job at Bethany, they will recognise the work that's happening there. If they, end up at Windermere, they'll be able to pick up an evidence-informed practice framework and recognise the practices in there. They'll be able to pick up a manualised EBP and see those practices in there. So I think in that way, Common Elements brings a lot of value to making evidence really portable, and some of those practices will cut across drug and alcohol, child protection, family violence. So that's really exciting. So watch that space. And the last thing I'll mention is just, I guess, to kind of give us a bit of a pep talk about Australia really being at the cutting edge of what's happening around common elements. So we collaborate with a lot of people globally who are doing this work. And so in terms of actually testing out how elements work in practice and understanding, how to get them implemented, I would say we're at the cutting edge of doing that. So we're collaborating with people around the world. Elements have been used a little bit more in mental health space overseas, in education, but in terms of social services, I think this is a really exciting place to be in terms of elements and what's happening. And so we're having a little think tank at the Evidence and Implementation Summit, our conference that's coming up in October. So we'll be meeting with some of those people and talking about the work that's happening here in Australia and thinking about how can we get better at executing elements? How can we help practitioners make better decisions about when and how to use them and matching them to families' needs? So that's pretty exciting as well, to be at the forefront of that kind of thinking. I think I might stop there.
Yes.
That's wonderful. Thank you. That's wonderful.
Do I stay?
I think we'll do questions at the end if that's okay, because I want to get you all up here and I want to try and get a really good discussion going. Thank you.